Hi, this is a YouTube group from Group O. Today in this video, we're going to be interviewing Gabe Low.
So, Gabe, have there been ways of spreading awareness about problems or erosion in Alaska other than what we're doing right now?
Yeah, great question. Since I've lived in Alaska, I grew up a little bit as a kid, but I moved back. I lived in Hawaii for a few years and then recently came back 2 years or 1.5 years ago and have noticed that there are definitely, campaigns. I see some flyers maybe sometimes, especially, there are lots of, I'm a university student at the University of Alaska Fairbanks and I, take classes and we talk about erosion. But on a larger public awareness scale, I don't see things very often unless there's a big event, right? When like, oh, the bridge eroded, or oh, the bike trail eroded because the river grew up and now we can't go on the bike trail, then it's like all over the news. But when there's not some sort of big event, it's definitely something that people kind of like forget about, I notice, especially in Alaska.
Would you say that they spread more awareness than when you lived in Maui?
I didn't live in Maui, I lived in Big Island in Hilo. And it's a really good question. I guess in Hawaii, we were aware of erosion because of, like, there were a few houses that were on some beach cliffs that were like falling into the ocean. And it was like, whoa, they're gonna fall off the cliff. There were like news stories about that. But it's definitely, I noticed that a lot of the awareness and, conversation about erosion is very reactive. It's like, oh, some erosion is happening, let's talk about it. But it's not like, hey, we should be prepared for this, let's get, infrastructure in place beforehand. So there's definitely that. I've noticed that in both places, both in Hawaii and Alaska. It's like a lot more reactive. Yeah.
I'm just gonna set that back up.
My apologies. There's a whole bunch of duct tape in the makerspace.
There is?
Yeah.
All right, let's pause. I'll go grab some. It's rolling.
It's good.
Okay, thank you.
So you know how there's different types of erosion, like wind, water, and stuff like that? What is your guys' specific type of erosion, like in Alaska? Is there like one specific type that like is like most around?
Yeah, great question. In Alaska, I think and this is me from personal anecdotal experience, I'm not an erosion expert, but there is a lot of water erosion, both coastal erosion, like from the sea bashing up against the coast and kind of knocking things off, and also erosion from rivers and streams, and when they flood or get really big, that it especially takes big chunks off of the side. Something that I think about with erosion is most erosion is natural, right? Erosion happens. Rivers go by and they take things off along with them, and that's how you get river deltas. That's how, like, a lot of the land that we live on is because it's put there by erosion, right? So, it's like sediment from all over the place, and that's great. What's tough sometimes when we interact with erosion is when it messes with our infrastructure that we build. It's like, oh man, how do we fight it? But it's really not fighting it, it's like working together with it, right? So, I don't know, I think about that sometimes. Maybe that wasn't an answer to your question, but yeah.
Okay, so
1 second. I'm just gonna... Okay, thank you.
okay, so this one isn't really in particular to erosion, it's just like kind of based on you, like how long have you been living in Alaska, and did you choose where you wanted to live, or was it like given to you by someone or something like that?
Yeah. Thanks. So I grew up in Alaska, sort of. I grew up between Alaska and the Big Island in Hawaii, with like 8 years in Cordova as a little kid, and then when I was 10, we went to Hawaii, and then after that, I moved around South America for a little while in Panama and Colombia, and then came back up to Anchorage in 2021. So just last year, and I chose to move back up. I love living in South America. It's an awesome place, one of my favorite places to live, but definitely Anchorage in Alaska is another place that I call home, and it's really, I love it. Yeah.
And so based off of that question, so I overheard you saying that your house was like starting to like erode, not your house specifically, but like where you live, it's
Yeah.
starting to erode. Like, are you doing anything to try and like slow it or prevent the erosion from happening?
Yeah, good question. So I just recently, a few months ago, bought a house with my wife. It was like kind of a crazy thing that we were able to do. But we bought a house in Anchorage, and it's in a really interesting spot on a little hill that looks right over a creek called Fish Creek that goes through. And it's like a little, the hill, it's like a kind of, not a cliff, but it's like a little bluff kind of drop off that goes down into the creek. And you notice that sometimes there are like, little bit of dirt that like falls down the hill, and sometimes the ground that's going over like towards there, it's like really steep, and fences are like not straight, they like fall down. So that's kind of like erosion a little bit happening in my yard, the edge of my yard. It's like falling off into the creek. So what I noticed that the people before me did, we just got the house, but I noticed that they brought in like a whole bunch of extra dirt from somewhere and like dumped it on the corner of the yard that was starting to sink. I don't know how good of an idea that was actually. Like, it seems flat now, but it's also like there's different types of dirt, and it's kind of interesting. I really would love to have like an expert come and tell me what that means, and like if I can build on top of it, or if it's like really unstable because it's like new dirt that's not the dirt that's supposed to be there. I heard one of my neighbors, it's the same situation where his yard is on the cliff, and the cliff, it's a little hill, right? But the hill was starting to fall out from under him, and he only had a few feet before his house, right? It was like his house, and then the hill was eroding so much that it was like almost, or the bank, I don't know what we could call that, but it was eroding so much. So he brought in a whole bunch of dump trucks of dirt and like filled in the hole, because technically it's their property, so they can do that. But it's definitely, I was thinking like, I wonder what that does to the biology of the stream and the ecosystem. And it's a really interesting, it's giving me a lot of cool perspectives about erosion and like how homeowners and individuals deal with it. But yeah, that's my little story.
And since you're like a new homeowner, I guess, are like all houses in Alaska like able to just be like move forward because of all the erosion that happens, or is it just like you have to have like certain ones or something? Like, I heard that you can like move your house like forward or something like that.
Oof. I would not say that most houses can be moved. I think that some houses can like be lifted up and moved over, like cabins, and especially like mobile homes, of course, and a lot of those. But a lot of houses, like my house has a big foundation underneath, has like a basement. Can't really move a basement. Like, it's pretty impossible to move a basement. I can maybe move the top half, but I don't think that's a solution for a lot of people. It's just, it's eroding over there, so let's move over here, right? A lot of people own land, and they like worked really hard to be able to own property that then is being like eroded away. It's like, what do we do? Want to just throw more dirt at it and maybe it'll go back. But I don't think that's probably the solution forever. But it's definitely something that I was really curious about.
Okay, last question. How would you say your shared experience living both on Big Island and Alaska would give you a possible like different outlook on erosion? Like, is it more similar or like very different or like kind of in between?
Yeah, yeah, that's a really, yeah, how do my shared experience of living in those places kind of build my perspective on erosion? I think probably the biggest difference was when I was in Hilo. It was a lot more looking at coastal erosion, and now in Anchorage, because my house is right on, you know, a creek, has this interesting thing happening. I'm definitely thinking more about, you know, instead of maybe like beaches getting moved away and that kind of thing, now it's more like private property and how people like deal with it on their own and kind of can help. Instead of like big government's trying to help, you know, save the beach, it's like, okay, how does this person save their piece of property that's being thrown into the river? So yeah, it's been I've really appreciated the two perspectives, and it's really helped me grow, and I'm yeah, happy to share that with you guys.
So like Hawaii was like everyone working together, and now in Alaska it's mostly like individual, like, oh, I can do this myself.
That's definitely, there's some big cultural differences, and that's one of them. It's definitely a lot more collectivistic, like let's all kind of try to work together to solve this. And also because the beaches in Hawaii, which are what's being affected by erosion, are all public, right? All the beaches in Hawaii are public. A lot of land that's along rivers and like along, you know, different places in Alaska is private. So, you know, or even like places in yeah, a lot of, it's a lot more like individual, oh, I'll just fix it by bringing in stuff. I mean, that's what I've noticed in my neighborhood and probably in a lot of other places in Alaska too.
Okay, well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.